Hello, my name is Timothy Naftali, and this is Afterwards. I'm director of the Richard Nixon Presidential Library and Museum in Yorba Linda, California, and it is my honor and privilege today to have as my guest on Afterwards Sir David Frost to discuss his book, Frost Nixon. Sir David, thank you for joining us today.
A pleasure to be here, Tim, a pleasure.
We have the opportunity today. We are going to be discussing Sir David's book, which is both the story of his famous and significant interview with Richard Nixon in 1977, unprecedented interview with the former president, but also his reflection since then, because this book, which has just come out, discusses not only the interview. It contains, in fact, transcripts of the entire, all four of the programs, but it's also an opportunity for Sir David to look back at this interview and put it into its historical and political context. Well done, Sir David.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim. It's been a very pleasurable experience to revisit these major issues in the background of this play and the film and all those things going on, but to go back to the actual root material.
I think it would be nice for our audience to get a better sense of you. Right now, Sir David, of course, is the host of Frost Over the World, which is on Al Jazeera English. But Sir David, you've had a long and illustrious career. And I would actually like to ask you about some of the things you did before you interviewed Richard Nixon. Tell us about That Was the Week That Was.
Well, That Was the Week That Was an incredible experience because first of all in Britain and then in America. I mean, it was the start of my career in America as well, but it started in England. And I was only 23 when I sort of co-created That Was the Week That Was with the producer Ned Sherrin. And it was thrilling because, particularly where it started in England, between 1956 and 62 when it started, ever since things like John Osborne's Angry Young Men in Look Back in Anger and the Suez War and things, the young in England had been really impatient. They'd been impatient for a demolition job. They'd been impatient for an irreverence that didn't exist and that people were still talking about as they were the elders and betters of the young and all of that. So that there was a real appetite for that sort of show. And in fact, if I hadn't done it, I would have wanted to watch it because it was something we all wanted to see. And so that was really the starting point. And the show started at 10:30 at night, which was later than it is now, and anyway later in America, in Britain than in America and so on. But anyway, 10:30. And it was expected to have an audience at best of 2.5 million. And it got the 2.5 million the first week. And the second week it got 4, then 6, then 8, then 9, then 11. Within 6 weeks it had gone to a breathtaking audience at 10:30 at night of 12 million. And in fact, by that stage, I felt that I could afford just about to visit Harrods for the first time, the great store. And I was in Harrods and I was writing out a check. And as I was doing so, the guy behind the counter was saying, "Oh, Mr. Frost, I just want you to know we never miss your show." And I said, "Thank you very much, carry on." Right? and he said, "And if we go out for the evening, then we make sure that we get back home by 10:25, so we're there in front of the set at 10:30. I said, "Thank you very much," and carried on writing. And he said, "And if we're at home, what we do is we make sure that we've done all the washing up and laid the table for breakfast by 10:25, so that we're there ready for the show." And I said, "Oh, thank you very much." Handed him the check, and he said, "Do you have any means of identification?"
well, wait, you've got
a moment of realism.
A moment of realism, but I think the audience needs to know why it was so unusual. The success of this program was unusual. This was not a serious news program.
No, it was successful because it was irreverent, I think, really. People were searching for irreverence. They had this staid establishment, this staid Conservative Party that had been there for too long, was tired and exhausted, and the public was tired and exhausted with them, and so that it was a it was an irreverent sort of demolition job, and that was the thing that people wanted, the young wanted, but to their astonishment, the older people found that they loved too.
When you watch, if you watch Jon Stewart or Stephen Colbert, do you have a sense that you're watching really the children, the product of what you started in Britain so many years ago?
Very much part of the same lineage, yes. I mean, true of Saturday Night Live too originally, and indeed Laugh-In, which George thought was always very generous about how much Laugh-In owed to That Was the Week That Was. And of course in England too, it led to a much greater freedom. I mean, there were things, you know, there were rules in the BBC about you couldn't do sketches about religion, and you couldn't impersonate politicians, and you couldn't mention religion, and all those sort of things that we just blew out of the window. And it meant that people coming along after us had that much extra freedom.
I believe John Cleese and the Monty Python gang also went to Cambridge.
Yes, what happened was there was, That Was the Week That Was, and then the next comedy show I did, which was more, deliberately more social than political, more contemporary than topical, was a show called The Frost Report, which brought John Cleese to television first time he'd ever done television, and also two people who became huge in British and in other television, the two Ronnies, Ronnie Barker and Ronnie Corbett, so that we had these three people exploding as stars all at the same time in The Frost Report. And we had amazing writers. I mean, including in our writing team were, or our performing team, were all five of the Pythons, apart from Terry Gilliam, who had a different background. But I mean, there was John Cleese, Graham Chapman, Eric Idle, who were the other two in that group? Michael Palin and Terry Jones, of course. And so they were all part of the writers. So that show, The Frost Report, the writers became as famous as the performers, and the performers became very famous.
It's astounding. And you were in your mid-20s at this point.
Yeah, yeah, and I was really lucky triggering off these things, and another series called At Last, the 1948 show, and specials with various of them. It was a wonderful way to start.
Now, how do you go from that to interviewing presidents, kings, and prime ministers?
Well, basically, it was due to America as much as anything, really, because I came to America to do That Was the Week That Was, originally 64, 65. And then when I was coming to America to do specials and things like that, I saw more and more of the thing that, an invention that really hadn't taken over in England, namely the talk show. And I was intrigued by this, the use of an audience and so on. I wanted it to be more than just showbiz. I wanted it to be political and have an audience that could participate, as well as, oddly enough, there was no participating audience show then. So the show had a range of people across the last week of the first series had Sean Connery, lighter interview, but a scoop because he didn't do many scoops. Then on the Thursday night, the Foreign Secretary of Great Britain saying that he'd realised that he didn't have the abilities to become Prime Minister, and so he would never try to be Prime Minister, take over from Harold Wilson. And indeed, one of the papers had a cartoon of Harold Wilson following this thing where he said, "I'm never going to try to be Prime Minister." He had a large list of the other 5 or 6 potential successors to him, and he was showing me the list and saying, "Would you mind interviewing these 5 as well?" You know, hopefully that they were going to gain it. So, and that was so. Just to give an example of the variety of the week, so that Wednesday Connery, Thursday George Brown, Friday Dr. Savundra, which was a mega expose of an insurance swindler and who'd escaped justice for 6 or 8 months and so on, and that was and before that in the program there was a great American, Dr. Robert Ettinger, the man who invented, I think, cryonics, which was this thing of, you know, whereby you
freezing people, no?
Pardon?
Freezing people.
Yeah, freezing people with incurable diseases and then thawing them out when there was a cure.
Right.
Now, and there was this, I suppose you'd call it a coffin in the studio, but I mean it was sort of papier-mâché. You know, it wouldn't withstand anything. It wouldn't withstand being taken down to the corner store, much less for 70 years. And I mean, it's absolutely. And John Cleese was working with me on that program because he's very interested in journalism as well. So he was sort of, as it were, an intellectual Ed McMahon on the program.